Hi, everyone. My name is Angie Vishianen, and I am the founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program that connects prospective law students to lawyers for mentoring so they can learn more about the legal profession before they decide whether or not they want to dive into law school. And we've been hosting these Zoom meetups since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic to connect pre-law students, current law students, and young lawyers, and invite speakers to come in and share with you some information that might be helpful for your legal careers. So please feel free to invite your friends or anyone else that you know that is pursuing a legal profession. We really love connecting all sorts of folks in this industry. And today I'm excited to introduce to you Lois Barth, and she is going to be sharing with you some information on how to build resilience. So Lois, I'll let you take it away.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me, Angie. And I have a very special sweet spot in my heart for lawyers, whether burgeoning lawyers, pre-law, law school, early career, mid, or do I go partner? I would rather in-house, like all of everything. And I just, it's really an honor because it is a journey to be a lawyer. And especially now, because so many of the lawyers that I've coached the years have talked about the camaraderie, the connection, the community, and now to be holed up and, doing everything online is definitely a shift. So I love how your program really talks about, mindfulness around, is this the right track? And if it is, how do you knock it out of the park? So it's great. So I'm very excited. So today we're going to talk about radical resiliency. And my program, my name is Lois Barth, as Angie said, and my brand is Courage to Sparkle. And the way I see it is shine bright, share your gifts, make a difference in whatever you do. And so today's program is the 4 C's of radical resiliency during really challenging times. And I say radical resiliency because we have, language has so much bias to it, and we bring our own interpretations. So I'm going to play around with what resiliency means, or what has meant to you, and what it could mean for you now, what I call pandemic part 2, the new abnormal. So I ask you, it's a very interactive program, like a conversation with content. Feel free to chat in the chat box. There'll be a place later on in the program for annotation tools. So I ask you now, when you think of the word of resiliency, what are the words and the images that come up for you when you hear the word resiliency? Because it's become one of those words that have sort of been a buzzword, like pivot, all these different words that we hear. So when you think of resiliency, what are the words and images that come up? Just type it in the chat box. Flexibility, great, Nicole. Perseverance. With C, courage, compassion. Emily, you're talking about half my material. I love it. Right, tenacity. Great, Kenya, Angie. Overcoming obstacles, exactly. Because what really resiliency to me is about, and really what the goal of this program is, to really look that resiliency doesn't come from what you think you can do, but it comes from overcoming the things you thought you couldn't do. And that's why today, the goal of today's program is to move from bouncing back to springing forward. Now that's Billy and the bouncing back ball. And we all know that. We all know that mile of just let me just bounce back. Let me just get through this time. Let me get my footing. And that's okay. And sometimes we have to do that. But we really want to look at radical resiliency, as I call Sal springing forward. How can I look for the solutions within the obstacles and the challenges, and use it as a catalyst to really move forward? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to be bringing in a lot of my Loisisms, which stand for lessons, opportunities, insights, and solutions. And the model that we're going to use is the 4 C's of radical resiliency during really challenging times. And I gotta say, I love all my 4 C's They all have a near and dear place in my heart. But the first one is particularly, well, it's my favorite. And I don't like to say it too loud because, you know, my other 3 C's, they might get a little jealous. You know how temperamental our creative children can be. But to me, it is the foundational piece of radical resiliency, and that is curiosity. So when you think of curiosity, and people are already talking about it, again, what do you think is helpful around curiosity when it comes to resiliency? Why do you think curiosity is important in general, but also when it comes to resiliency? Just type it in the chat box. Being able to ask what it is and isn't working without being judgmental. Great, Emily, exactly. It gives you, it's a lens in which to look at. Terrific. Not just accepting something for face value. Terrific. Never stop learning. Staying open-minded, not having expectations. This is great. It makes you very agile. And the way I see it is curiosity is to the mind what yoga, when we go to yoga, is to the body. And when we're curious, we have more energy, we're more engaged, we think and act in more solution-focused ways. So a little piece of brain science, we have the dancing yoga brain here on the little mat. A little piece of brain science, which I'm fascinated by brain science. There is a mechanism in the prefrontal cortex called the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex is all about goal setting and moving forward. And when you are curious, that hippocampus lights up and wants to start solving problems and creating solutions. So when we stay focused on curious, all of a sudden we're lighting up the circuits of the brain, which are naturally our goal setting forward moving mechanisms. But for me, I mean, in all of these reasons, I believe very passionately in curiosity. But the reason for me, it's number one in my tools, is because curiosity basically helped to change and save my life. So I'll never forget how loud my inner critic was. Slash, I actually named my inner critic. You know those voices, the wah, 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 wah voices. I'll never forget how loud my inner critic Slash was that day when we were outside my apartment in New York City so many years ago. I mean, that day, Slash, I call her Slash, my anti-superhero, out to slash my self-esteem. Well, that day she was so loud, it was as if she had her own theme song. And it went a little like this. Here I am to ruin your day. Can't believe you ate all those donuts. 10 donuts at once. You'll never lose the weight. You're going to be fat for the rest of your life. Nothing I hadn't heard before. I'm sure many of you could relate to it. Nothing I hadn't heard before from good old Slash. Our inner critics, did you ever notice our inner critics know exactly what to say to really get to us, to take us out? It's like they don't only push our buttons, they install them. But that day, for some interesting, odd, magical reason, I heard a new voice, the voice of curiosity that I had never heard before. And that voice kept saying, what if? What if? What if you never lose or gain another pound again in your life? How would you live your life? I was shocked. I had never heard that voice before. I thought, what if? What if I never lose or gain another pound again in my life? How would I live my life? Will you ever do something, you have no idea why you're doing it, but it's like this force is pushing you to do it? Well, that's what it was like for me. On automatic pilot, I just open my apartment door and I go into the bathroom and I take out a scale and I put it in the hallway. In our hallway, we had 2 piles. The neighbors, one neighbor's trash is another neighbor's cool stuff pile, we call it. And I put a big sign and I said, this scale works perfectly. It just no longer works for me. Bye-bye. And I marched back into my apartment and I took out a piece of paper. You remember paper. And I started writing a list of things I'm waiting to do once I'm thin. And I kept writing and writing and writing and writing. And in less than 5 minutes, I had 100 things I was waiting to do once I was thin. And I talk about my Loisisms throughout my program. And one of my favorite ones is life is always talking. Make sure you're listening. And at that moment, I knew I had two choices. Keep doing what I was doing, basically drown in a sea of self-loathing, or to hop above, to hop on the boat of curiosity and see what could happen. Well, luckily I did the second one, because the first one, doing the same thing, expecting a different result, many of you may know, is the definition of insanity. Thank you so much. We've all done that, right? And I attacked that list with a vengeance. And I started to check things off the list that I was waiting to do once I was thin. Because in that moment, I realized my problem wasn't my weight. It was waiting to be perfect. It was allowing negativity, self-judgment, negative self-talk to rule my life. And the results were amazing. Certain actions were terrifying, others were exhilarating, and others were like, you kidding me? I put my life on hold for this? And something really magical happened. My life blew open. My life got a whole lot bigger. And ironically, my body got a whole lot smaller. And I realized in that moment, that was just a pivotal moment in my life, that when I move forward with curiosity and compassion, which we'll talk about in a little bit, things shift. And that was really a moment for me to really take on that we move from criticism to curiosity. That's when our lives change. And I say this very intentionally because so many people struggle with self-criticism, and especially women. And it's very much enculturated. And when we are critical, we contract our body, mind, our spirit, our thinking. But when we're curious, which many of you have already said, we expand, we create possibilities and options. And so that's what we're going to talk about, is how do we get curious? How do we use curiosity to stay strong? Because curiosity is a big part of resiliency. So what I'd love to ask you, and you're more than welcome to type it in the chat box, or even if you want to, basically, I guess you could raise your hand or in the chat box, say that you'd like to share. Either way is fine, because I know most of you are off video. What was your major learning through pandemic part 1, and how can you use what you learned to grow in 2021? Angie and I were talking before the session started today that she got to access so many more people through the pandemic because she wasn't in her car and having to deal with commuting, and had access to so many people. And that's a big part of her business and her model and her outreach. So I ask you right now, I know for me, I had to start to befriend technology in a whole other way that I didn't think I could, but I am slowly but steadily. So what did you learn through pandemic part 1, and how can you use what you learned to grow in 2021? I'd love to hear it, or if you'd like to share, you can just, if you're on video, you can just raise your hand, or you can just type it in the chat box. What did you learn through the pandemic? Excuse me, did somebody share?
Hi. Yeah, I guess for me, I would have gone to college this year. I graduated high school in the dead middle of the pandemic. And so I took a gap year, and I've been able to learn a lot about just myself and what I want to do. And I think just getting out of the academic wheelhouse of just staying in there and trying to do school stuff, and being able to not have that structure of school allowed me to explore more deeply like what I actually want innately to do with my career. And so just personally, that's really valuable for me when I go to college. So I'm not like, I just have a better direction of what I want. And so I'm not so focused on what other people are doing or feeling like, oh, I have to do what they're doing, because I have a better image of what
I love that. Now, who, I didn't get your name.
oh, I'm Catherine.
Catherine. Ah, I didn't see it down there. Excuse me. Oh, great. Great, Catherine. You know, Catherine, you brought up some really great things. It's you, what I really heard and what you said is you stayed in your own lane. You allowed intuitively what felt right for you versus, you know, checking off the box, better go to college. So I think that's really great. What do you feel like you learned during that time? Obviously to listen to yourself, but what new information did you get from that gap year? Which I think is terrific, by the way. Congratulations on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, just actual tangible stuff. I got to connect with a lot of lawyers. I interned for Angie, so I got to talk with a lot of lawyers and learn about different career paths in law. And so that's very useful information externally. And then just internally, I also just got to think more about like my major and some of the classes I want and some of the research I want to do.
I think that's terrific. Thank you so much for sharing that, Catherine. And I'm hearing some really great feedback as well from Nicole talked about, I learned everything did not end. Connect with others through the phone, social media. Yes, we're very adaptive creatures, us human beings. And to know that, also made new friends, virtual conferences, which was cheaper than attended in person. Absolutely. There's so many great ways. Angie, making genuine connection through social media, slowing down, Kenya, and think about what you really want to do. Yes, and inner critics can definitely be our worst enemy. That's so true. And I think it's very in line with just this path of learning to trust ourselves and listen and not compare ourselves or feel like we have to check off the box, which is so prevalent, especially going the law trajectory. You feel like, oh my God, I got to check off all the boxes instead of like, wait, what's important to me? And that will really serve you as you go into your path. I think that's really terrific. One of my lowest isms, because I have a tendency to look everywhere else, big shiny object syndrome. I don't know if anybody could relate to that. And my little lowisism is I have to stay in the lowest lane. It's the quickest way to a super life. Of course, because my name is Lois, I can, but you can do it too. But really, when we stay in our own lane and listen, that's when the magic really happens. That's great. So the first tool is curiosity. And the second tool is about compassion. And I think compassion is just so important because it gives us a perspective. And we're all going through such a challenging time. And we just celebrated. I don't know if the word is celebrated, but we just passed the 1 year mark and we're in the second part and certain things are opening and certain things. So it's almost even more mushier and more uncertain than the first one. So it has its own issues, challenges, but opportunities. But I've learned that compassion is what really brings us through all of the phases. And I really experienced the importance of compassion the first week of COVID. I was going to my grocery store, my local, I had to uproot. I live in New York City, but I also have an old farmhouse in upstate New York, which I'm in right now. And I got all suited up, woo, day trip, going grocery shopping, and had the gloves up to here and 3 masks and a couple of layers short of a hazmat suit. And I'm on the grocery line and 6 feet apart, social distance. And one of the young cashiers, well-meaning, he got off of break and he said, everybody, cash register 1, open. And everybody behind myself and this woman just literally catapulted straight to cash register 1. And this woman turned to me and she was so angry and so stressed out. And she was like, did you see that? Did you see that? They cut ahead of us. We've been waiting here for 20 minutes. And they just got ahead of us. It's not fair. It's not fair. I said, well, you're right. It's not fair, but I don't know about you. I'm just so grateful that young man showed up to work today so that the rest of us can get our groceries. Yeah, you're right. I guess I should be grateful. But she was really stressed out. She had, the pursed lips and the knitted brow and the tight jaw. Let's just say it wasn't a good look. And I said to her, you don't have to be any way that you're not. Your feelings are your feelings. I totally get it. Please go ahead of me. And she looked at my huge cart, just heaping. I wasn't hoarding toilet paper though. And she was shocked. And she's like, really? I can go ahead? And I said, absolutely. And as I was waiting online, I thought, wow, this woman is really stressed out. Not that the rest of us aren't. And I got curious and I got compassionate. And I said, sounds like it's been a really rough time for you. Rough? Rough? More like brutal. I have a 94-year-old mother who lives with me. I can't get the home health aides here. And every moment I leave my house, I'm terrified that she fell and hurt herself. It's brutal. Wow. I am so sorry that you're going through that. I just hope you get a home health aide soon and hope the rest of your day is better. She said to me, it already is because of you. Thank you. And that reminded me of the power of compassion. We throw around all these buzzwords right now about transparency and the transparent culture and work culture and all these important things, and they're all important, but I really feel that if we just really integrated compassion as a regular part of our life and our behavior and our work culture, so many things would get cleaned up. And compassion is something that doesn't cost us anything, and yet it's invaluable to the person because we're all going through a hard time. We're all trying to figure it out, and we're all making up as we go, and we're all going to fall short. And the importance is so important to just look for opportunities. And the way I see it is compassion has 3 elements. It's about treating ourselves with kindness, generosity, and patience. And it's just about being aware. So when you find you're triggered, you're emotionally upset, or you see somebody else in that same situation, you take a breath, you tune into what either you or the other person might be dealing with, and you offer an act of kindness, generosity, and patience. That's it. That's really all it takes. So I want to ask you a question, and I think I know the answer. Can you let me know in the chat box, or if you want to be on video, do you have an easier or more difficult time being compassionate with yourself or others? So if you have an easier time being compassionate with yourself, right? Easier self or easier with others? Just type it in the chat box. I pretty much know the answer, but I'd love to hear anyway. Way easier with other, Catherine. Easier being compassionate. Yes, others who are strangers. Very true, Emily. It's sometimes really, and much easier being compassionate towards others. So the verdict is in, right? Easier with others. We see that across the board, and I especially see this with women. I do a lot, not solely, but I do a lot of speaking to women in male-dominated industries. And so many women come up, which of course law is, depending upon the facet of law, but by and large, I see women come up to me after my presentation and they will say, when we talk about slash negative self-talk, they'll say, if I spoke to my friends and my clients the way I spoke to myself, I would have no friends or clients. And it's that clear for them. And we are often brutal with ourselves as women. It's changing. There's a lot shifting, but it's still there. And we also get, it's not only within ourselves, but it's enculturated. It's embedded in the media, in messaging. I mean, we see it all over the place. And so I want to take you through an exercise. It's a body-mind centering technique to be able to basically learn how to be compassionate with yourself. So, you all ready? Ready to learn a tool on how to be more compassionate with yourself? Great. So I want you to close your eyes. I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to take a couple of nice deep breaths. And I want you to focus on your breathing. And you could put your hand on your chest or on your belly and just focus on your breathing. And I want you to think about the last time that you were compassionate with someone in your life. And compassion can look a whole lot of different ways. So maybe you offered them some positive, supportive feedback. Maybe you gave them a resource. Maybe you just listened. Maybe you reminded them what a rock star they are because they were having a moment. And I want you to just think about the last time you were compassionate with someone. You offered them kindness, patience, generosity. And in your mind's eye, the third eye, as they call it, I want you to visualize that person. You don't have to visually replicate them. It could be their energy, their spirit, the feeling. And I want you to see that person really taking it in. They might be nodding, breathing deeper. Their breathing is slowing down. They're nodding their head. A lightness comes to their face, but they're really taking in your act of compassion. And just be with that feeling, how that feels to really take that in. And take a couple of nice deep breaths. And now what I want you to do is I want you to see the image of that person dropping away. And I want you to put your own image there and a very specific part of yourself. It might be a part right now that is being really critical or just had a disappointment, maybe fell short of your expectations, maybe a bad breakup. It doesn't make a difference, but that part of you, your perfectionist, the part of you that most needs your own compassion more than anything about something that you're going through. And keep breathing. And I want you to really extend that same act of compassion, of generosity to that part of you. It could be with words. It could be just sending them energy and love and care and reassurance. And I know it may not be easier for some of you, but I want you to see that part start to take it in, start to really integrate it. Keep breathing. Take a couple of nice deep breaths. And now come back to the space and open your eyes. I would love, we have a little time, so I would love to hear from some of you if you'd like to unmute and share what you learned from that exercise. And what part of it was easy? What part of it was difficult? And how do you feel like you can integrate it more into your life? How can you use this insight and exercise to be more compassionate with yourself right now? Would anybody like to share? Just jump in. Angie.
Hey, Lois, this is Angie.
Yes.
I think for me, it was really profound just to see, like, to compare how would I treat myself in this situation. You know, it was one thing to picture somebody else first, the way that I treated them, and the kindness and compassion that I offered them. And then I thought, well, what would I do for myself in this situation? And I thought back and I was like, man, I have been really critical of myself in sometimes, you know, and I think especially because a lot of times, you know, when I'm mentoring other people, I have to stop and make sure, like, okay, are you coming from a place of kindness? Are you making sure that if you're offering criticism, that it's coming from a place of kindness? And how can you know, soften it, but still be straightforward with them? But then I find myself not doing that for myself, you know, when I'm providing myself criticism, it's all so harsh. So it was really shocking, I guess, to think about how I treated myself in comparison to what I usually try to do with other people. But I think it is nice to be able to visualize a method that you can sort of interrupt that negative self-talk.
Absolutely.
'Cause sometimes I think it just comes so natural. You know, your negative self-talk comes so natural
So
and you're quick
natural.
to criticize yourself. And if you need to be able to step back and interrupt that thought process and really try to reframe, this can be a really helpful exercise to sort of, get you out of your own head.
Absolutely. And thank you for what you shared, Angie. It's so true. And I love that you check in when you do your mentorship. Am I coming from kindness? And are my edges soft? And what I really hear, and this is so human and common, is, if you've built 100-pound weights in the spiritual gymnasium of compassion for others, but when it comes to yourself, maybe your barbells are at 2 or 3 pounds, not because anything's wrong, it's just they haven't been developed. And I love what you're saying. It's a skill. It's a skill and it's a practice. And I've done this exercise so many different times, and people are like, I don't even know where to begin. And I'm like, that's great that you don't know where to begin, because that's how you can get curious. So I think it's really important. It's a skill. And when we are harsh, to be able to stop and breathe and go, whoa, if this was my BFF, what would I be saying to her or him? If this was my doggy that just hurt himself, how would I treat them? That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'd love to hear from some others as well. You can type in the chat box, but I'd love it if you could unmute yourself and share if you feel so guided. Certainly don't want to put anybody on the spot. Anybody else like to share?
Hi, this is Nicole. I guess I'll share.
Thank you, Nicole, for being positively visible. Thank you.
Well, I could show
Oh,
my
I
video.
didn't mean you have to get off video. That's not what I mean.
Okay. I did notice my breathing changed when it came to reflecting on myself. I couldn't keep the deep breath and I had to think about it. And when I also realized where you think about when other people make mistakes, it's about that thing. And I think with me, I take it more personal. And just realizing it's okay. If you mess up, it's either way to fix it, or you just deal with the repercussions. Just you could just keep going. So if I could do that with other people, why can't I do it with myself?
Exactly. Thank you so much. Yeah, to really be able to do a reframe on that. So thank you. Yeah, and the more that we can do that, more we go, oh, oops. I also, you wrote, I didn't realize how harsh I was towards myself. I wasn't prepared for how emotional. It made you realize that you need to be much kinder and actually visualize giving yourself a hug. We can do actually a hug meditation at the end, because there's actual science. And I know it may sound a little woohoo to some of you, but giving yourself a hug actually does change your nervous system. I love what you said, that giving yourself a hug. Great, Kenya. Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit of why it's also so important. Going back to not only being a human being and a woman, but also being in a law profession, right? There are going to be a lot of inner and outer glass ceilings. I did a 3-module series for the senior litigators at Mintz Levins in the end of 2019. There's all kinds of stuff that happens. Yes, things are blowing open with DEI and women having more opportunities, but there's still inner and outer glass ceilings that as women we have to shatter. And the more kind we are, the more strength we have. We have this misnomer that if we're loving and accepting and kind to ourselves, that somehow we'll be soft, we'll be a slacker, we'll be thin-skinned. And I think it's the total opposite, right? I think that the kinder we are, the more compassion, the stronger we become. We bend but don't break. And as we go, whether depend what facet of law, the partner track, in-house, whatever it is, the more that we can develop self-compassion, we get more agile. We are able to bounce back when we have our setbacks. So it's just a different way of thinking of it. I think many people, especially women, have this misnomer that if we're gentle with ourselves, if we're kind and compassionate, that we'll slack off. That's not the same as being in denial and giving ourselves a pass. So compassion for self. A couple of points here. Fire your perfectionist. Good enough is great. Expectations are planned disappointments. Laugh at your foibles and your faux pas, your mess ups. Some of my best moments speaking, coaching, writing was when I messed up and I outed myself for it. I was transparent. It makes people feel more connected to you. Always feeling like we have to look perfect is exhausting and keeps us actually more distant to people. Celebrate, reward your victories. Again, there's a piece in the brain, the parietal lobe, that lights up when you give yourself meaningful rewards that are connected with victories that actually not only give you dopamine, but incentivize you to keep going. So compassion, for some of you who may or may not know, Sharon Salzberg is a New York Times bestseller several times over. She really has mastered the field of mindfulness. And she says, in a sense, self-compassion is just like a muscle. The more practice we have flexing it, when life doesn't go our way, the stronger and more resilient we become. So looking at how will you flex and strengthen the muscle of compassion for yourself and others. And the third piece is, if anybody also during my program, our program, this program, have any questions or things you want to mention, feel free to type it in the chat box. The third is connection. So I don't know about you folks, but I've become more and more technologically reliant during the pandemic, obviously for obvious reasons. And I would never leave my house without my phone fully charged. And if it wasn't, I would make sure to have a charger for the car, because let me look at my day ahead. How many hours am I going to be back? And I think we can all fall in that category. And yet, how many of us have looked at our day ahead and asked ourselves, wait, is my own battery charged? What do I have today? And if it's not charged, what am I going to do about that? What action will I take? So to start looking at one small action you can take to charge your own battery. Feel free to type it in the chat box, right? Because it's the whole thing of putting on our own oxygen mask. What's one small action you can take to charge your own battery? And I think of self-care, the word self-care gets thrown around an awful lot. And I see self-care through a model I call the Fems Model, nothing to do with gender. It's just the four building blocks of self-care. Food, exercise, mindfulness, presence, right? Mindfulness, presence, sleep. This is not about being on a perfect keto, no carb, low carb, high fat, low fat. This is not about perfectionism. It's just, I love that, Emily, just nice smelling a Yankee mango peach salsa candle. Yeah, I love that. I also really like the, I forgot what they call them, the Canterbury series in the Yankee candle. It's really great. Food, exercise, mindfulness, presence. Where would you rate yourself? Where would you self-rate yourself? How much of your food helps you fuel your body? Exercise, movement allows you to feel vibrant, mindfulness, present, calmer, and sleep well rested. So I don't know if you're familiar with meditation, read a book, exercise, great. We have an annotation tool at the toolbar at the bottom. You could see it where you can annotate on the slide itself. But if you can't or don't have access to it or don't feel like it, I'd love to hear in the chat box how you would self-rate yourself for food, exercise, mindfulness, and sleep. Just type it in the chat box. Again, we're moving from criticism to curiosity, to just ask yourself, where am I in the food box? Like, how much of my food choices help to fuel me? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is very little, 10 is a lot. How would you rate yourself? So you could put it, you can annotate on the slide, or you can type it in the chat box. Okay, Emily writes food 7, exercise 3, mindfulness 4, sleep 2. Okay, it's really interesting. Thanks, Emily. It's interesting to see where the gaps are, where are the areas that you're stronger, and some areas that need some work. Great, who else? Where are you in each of these areas? And again, I can't say it enough. This is just a self-assessment. Just get curious. That song from years ago, remember? That I actually call it, it was Let's Get Physical. I go, let's get curious. I will break into song. It's who I am. Okay, let's see. We have, Kenyon says food 5, exercise 2, mindfulness 7, sleep 3. So again, everybody has pockets of, where they excel, and everybody has pockets for growth. Nicole, food 7, exercise 7, mindfulness 8, sleep 5, allergies. Catherine, food 8, exercise 8, mindfulness 6, sleep 4. Yeah, sleep is a big current a theme that comes up for people. Kenya, -3 for sleep. Gotcha. So thank you for sharing this. I want you to ask yourself, what are 1 or 2 simple actions you can take? So if you're a food 5, what can you do to move it up to a 6? If your sleep is -3, which is hard on your body, what can it be to be -1 or 0? Just to start thinking about it. And again, there are trends happening. I love audiobooks. I go for very long walks every day. And I'm listening to Tiny Habits, and the new trend with micro habits in America, we seem to supersize everything, but that's not how people really change. We change by consistent, small, aligned actions. Great. This is just an aside for some of you struggling with sleep stuff. I definitely had a very big bout of insomnia. This is not prescriptive. It's just a suggestion. I got a weighted blanket. It was a game changer for me. And some people don't like heavy blankets, but it was like being swaddled as an adult. I found it incredibly comforting. And I started listening to a very specific sleep DVD. I'm happy to share that information, that those things were game changers for me. Everybody's different, creating more sleep hygiene. But again, we want to get curious, not critical. Terrific. Now we're looking at connections with others. What's your unique way of connecting and making a difference? I think this is so important because it's so easy for us to feel isolated during this time. And especially with LinkedIn and so many other outlets to connect with people. Angie was talking about Zoom coffees. To look at right now, what is your secret sauce for making connections? Meaningful connections, heartfelt connections, whether they're business or personal, not doing it how everybody else does it, finding your own way. I mean, I started working, in addition to my business, I started working with a corporate training company during the pandemic. And it happened in a very simple way. This woman who I had met at a conference 10 years ago posted a picture with her son. And everybody was like, looking good, gorgeous, you're gorgeous, your son is gorgeous. And it was fine. I mean, everybody wrote lovely things. There was nothing wrong. with what anybody wrote, a lot of likes. And I saw it in a different way, right? Because I see things in a very connected way. And I said, what a powerful message to young men and young women that their mothers can be both nurturers and powerhouses in the workplace. Thank you. And she was like, wow, thanks for saying that. And I said, hey, can we have a conversation? She said, sure. And I said, I met you 10 years ago at a conference. She barely remembered me. And then before we knew it, she said, I need to bring you on board to start doing some corporate trainings for me, because we don't have that subject matter expert in our wheelhouse. That all happened because I see connections with things. And I did something a little atypical. Another client of mine, I know this is going to sound outside the box. Another colleague of mine, it was her birthday on LinkedIn. So rather than just reach out to her, I actually, on the voice activated, I sang her my birthday song. I have a very special birthday song that I love singing to people. And she was like, oh my goodness, I didn't know you love to sing. And I ended up being a member, a guest on her podcast. Again, we all have our secret sauces. It could be your connection that you connect people with others. Maybe you have the high Google DNA where you are a resource of information. You like to socialize, but looking at how we can bring our own special sauce, our own unique gifts with connection. So I'd love to ask you, and you can unmute, you can type in the chat box, what's your special way of connecting with others that are very meaningful, whether it's a way that you love to connect that gives you joy, that's not like, oh my goodness, I got to reach out to 2 new people. You actually enjoy it because it's part of your makeup. I'd love to hear from a few of you. You can type it in the chat box. What's your unique way of connecting with others? You, Emily, great. You express gratitude, appreciation via thank you notes. Oh my God, I love thank you notes. I have 6 different versions of thank you notes. Oh, yay. I do them around Thanksgiving and Christmas in handwriting cards. Oh my goodness. And people usually love them. They like it. I love that you do that. That is so great. Thank you for sharing that, Emily. Who else? What's your special? I don't meet that many other people who handwrite thank you notes, so it's so great to see that. Who else? What's your special way? Sometimes it's making introductions with people. My handwriting is hard to do neatly. I understand, Emily. I'm a left-handed person, so I totally relate to that. What else? I'm going to stay with this because I think it's important. We sometimes forget that we have everything we need right now within us to strengthen our relationships. Kenya, great. I think that is something I need to work on. I'm such an introvert. I'm really glad you're bringing this up, Kenya, because introverts sometimes have a challenging time, or it's only seen like extroverts are the only ones to make connections. But I really encourage you to leverage that special sauce that you have that makes you different, whether you're an introvert or not. So thank you for sharing that. That's an important point. Nicole, great. Send email cards, gifts, greetings, friends, advice. This is terrific. This is part of your strategic outreach, in terms of making meaningful connections. Angie, sharing your failures and obstacles you faced openly and honestly. Try to show people that lawyers can be fun, empathetic, kind, creative, and tech savvy. This is so important, especially Angie, when I met you, I was like blown away what a rock star you are. And you share, and you are a rock star, and you sharing, behind the curtain that things are still, it's a dance. And I know that it's so important that when anybody shares their vulnerable side, it makes me feel closer to them. Thank you so much for saying that. Okay, so to move on to the final, which is courage. And I love courage, and the book that I wrote several years ago is Courage to Sparkle, The Audacious Girl's Guide to Creating a Life That Lights You Up. And I love courage because it's from the French root core of the heart, that when we do things not in the absence of our courage, but right alongside them, that's when things shift. We act in our courageous ways, we unleash the possibilities versus living in regrets. One of my sheroes of all times is Sarah Blakely, who created Spanx, the women's shapewear. She's the first self-made female billionaire in America. And she started her business, which many of you may or may not know, with $5,000 selling faxes door to door. And when they asked her why she felt she was so successful, she said, "It was my father growing up. We had to come to the dinner table every night, 3 or 4 nights a week, and tell and share what we had failed at. And the bigger the failure, the more we were celebrated." How many of us got that messaging? I certainly didn't. And that she said she knew right off the bat that she was going to fail over and over, but failure didn't scare her because she saw it as an opportunity to grow. In fact, when she didn't come to the table with a failure, her father was disappointed in both her and her brother, who was also a very successful entrepreneur, that they weren't stretching themselves. So when we reframe failure as an act of courage, that we took that chance, whether we fell flat on our face, whether we had a victory or anything in between, that we're moving towards acts of courage. So I ask you again, what is one courageous action you can take right now to make 2021 strong for yourself? Applying for a job where I don't meet all of the qualifications. Thank you, Emily. And yes, I heard that Randy Pouch lecture. It was incredible. Yes, we both know, all of us know, that the statistics are pretty staggering, that women feel like they have to apply for a job that they have 95 to 110% of the job requirements, where men only feel 30 to 40%. That's a real act of courage. Being more open with people instead of secluding. Thank you, Kenya. Yeah, to start to look at what is that one act of courage that I can make to make 2021 right. And now it's about implementation. It's all about implementing. Big changes happen from taking small, consistent, and aligned actions. This is Tilly the tortoise that is crossing the finish line. One of my favorite childhood stories was the tortoise and the hare, rather than feeling we have to do everything yesterday. So I ask you now, what are you taking away from today's presentation? What action do you feel guided to do? It could be an internal shift, it could be an external, from today's presentation, because it's all about implementation. Insights and implementation, obviously. What are you taking away from today's presentation? If you need some time to think about, be more confident in trying something new. Nicole. Great. I think that's terrific. Any other things? Well, I want you to really think about that, connected with the courageous action, and what one small piece can you take away from today's presentation around radical resiliency? So just to wrap up, our 4 C's are curiosity, compassion, connection, and courage. And to remind us that you got this, we got this. Even on those days where you feel like radical resiliency, I just want to get through the day. Just to remind you that you got this.
Thank you so much, Lois, for that presentation and just all of your words of wisdom today. I've been so happy to have you just share all of this great knowledge with our students, and just how to be, kind and compassionate with yourself, and really, kind of be gentle. And I think that is the epitome of resilience, is really developing those skills to, you know, be able to push through the really challenging times, as you said, by giving yourself grace and by giving others grace and kindness. And I really appreciate you being here to share your time with us.
Pleasure.
Does anybody have any questions for Lois? If they have follow-up questions, Lois, do you mind if they message you on LinkedIn?
Oh, no, I would really like that. Absolutely. And anybody is be happy to connect with you via LinkedIn. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. I'll share your LinkedIn and the recording. Once the recording is posted, I'll let you know, and that way you can share it on your channels as well. And thank you so much for being here, and thank you
My
all
pleasure.
for
And
spending
thank you all.
Okay,
Have a great
bye.
day. Bye.